Hello Geeks and Gamers, Matt Lemke here with True Gamer Goggles, gamer-goggles.com. And today we're going to continue down the path of my RPG chats. Particularly we're going to continue with Role of Character, and we're going to talk about the half-races, or the bastards of role-playing. And if you haven't seen my flip-through on the Bastards of Golarion, please do. It's a pretty good book, especially for this. It is geared, there's a lot of information on half-elves and half-orcs in this book, and it really kind of highlights the idea behind what I consider a bastard, which we'll get into in a minute, but it also includes oddities, and we'll talk about that more in about 10 minutes. A bastard is basically, and sometimes, you hear the word bastard and people are talking negatively about someone. In this situation, it's not necessarily negative about an individual or a person or their personality, and it's not necessarily a statement that they're illegitimate. It might, however, be a statement that shows that there's someone or something that doesn't fit in. In our real world, we can apply it to foster children. A lot of foster children are at odds, or sometimes, just that kid that is really shy. You could loosely apply the terminology to that child being a bastard because they don't quite fit in. They can't quite make the puzzle pieces fit into the rest of the society. And that's kind of the thing we're looking at here. We're looking at that type of character or personality that comes out of being a half race or an odd race or something just odd altogether that turns you into a bastard. With that being said, we're going to start with half-elves. And half-elves would differ a lot, especially if they're raised in a human society or an all-elven society. But you can even take that one step farther. They could have been orphaned during some kind of a war while they were fighting the dwarves, and they ended up being raised in a mine. What would that be like for a half-elf, right? So basically, you got things to think about, like the differences of maturity, and how it's going to affect them. Like humans mature faster than half-elves. So if you're raised by a human, by the time you're ready to go off into the world, your friends are coming back, they've pretty much accomplished their profession or whatever, or you're hastily rushed out into the world because they think you should be of age, type of thing. Another big factor in it is how does society perceive the half-race, or that section of society where the individual is being raised. Is the individual accepted, or does the individual have to fight for every single thing they have, every scrap of food? This is going to affect their personality, and how they develop and mature is going to reflect their disposition. For example, if a character is constantly put down and bullied by humans because of their race, they're probably going to have some kind of disdain towards them, and they're going to be like, well, I'm not really going to trust them because every time I've trusted them, they've set me up, type of thing. It's really going to play havoc on their society. Now, when you flip that over and you put the elf in the elven society, being raised as a half-elf, they mature faster than their friends. So they might actually leave as soon as they can because they're having a hard time adjusting and adapting. They may never return. And then there's the whole parental thing. Parents have all this wisdom of things on how to deal with their children, but they've been doing it for years and years and years, and then they've got this child that all of a sudden is a half-race. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be an illegitimate child. It could just be something that goes back generations. And somehow the half-whatever race got mixed in with the gene pool. So there's a lot of ways you can play that up. And then, I suppose if you have a half-elf, half-orc, which we can get into that later, that could even change things up even more as to how, because orcs are probably a lot less patient than elves. But, the whole fact that you've got a half something with an elf is probably going to make them less patient, and therefore they're probably going to be more inquisitive and ask more questions of their parents, which might drive an elvish set of parents cuckoo. the other thing to note about half-elves in an elven society, because of their nature of probably being more inquisitive and growing faster, even though they're accepted, they may feel, just because of what's going on around them and nobody can really explain it to them, that they're still outcasts even though they're fully accepted. I mean, think about it for a second. Go back to when you were a teenager and imagine aging faster than your teenage friends around you. What? How would that make you feel? What would you do? Hey, kitty. This cat just loves interrupting this show. And then we're going to move on to half-orcs. Half-orcs are kind of interesting, and, after looking through this book, I've kind of thought about half-races very differently, to the point where anytime I make a half-race, I want to actually just create a new one, because I think it'll be fun. And with the Advanced Race Guide, you can easily do that. But that's another video altogether. So you've got the half-orc, which, talk about a minority. Orcs in and of themselves are probably viewed as, let's just say they're not popular as a whole. Orcs generally are thought of as evil. I know within playing a character that's not necessarily true, but orcs in fantasy literature have always been made out to be bad guys almost. It's unusual. Somebody should break the mold maybe. But most races see them as bad, like I mentioned. Orcs, more than any other race, probably gain their disposition based off of their environment and how they're raised. Because aside from green skin and possibly aggressive tendencies like Klingons, they probably live off the environment, and it probably adapts and forces them to shape, and it hones their personalities. I think if they were accepted, they're more likely to trust. But if they're not accepted, they're much less likely to trust. And as a result, I think they would have very few friends. I actually kind of think that this orc character might make a good NPC type of gunslinger, where they're a real, like a lawful, the Old West gunman that doesn't trust anyone, because he's a marshal and he's been stabbed in the back so many times. So he's using all these cool feats and things of grit to do these cool things, to do things for his god, but because of where he was raised, he ends up being a lawful good type of character. So you can switch over now to being a half-orc raised by orcs, and they're probably seen as being weaker, at least in the traditional sense of how we view an orc. In some ways, they may also be kind of uncanny, because lending to their half-race, they might be a little bit more intelligent, plus being a step in between orc and whatever race they're a part of from the gene pool. Maybe they end up getting positioned in a place of some kind of political authority or something, because they seem to be more approachable by the outside world. Again, these aren't rules, these aren't rules or anything of the nature. But now we're going to move into where it gets a little bit more complicated. And these are those things that just don't fit in. They're not necessarily popular. I mean, they are. Some of the things are very popular, but these could be things that are just randomly born into a family or a clan or whatever. So, for example, cat. I got put you. On page 19 of this book, they actually go through the Bastards of Glory, and they start the unusual things, and they have fear, changelings, and thieflings as their examples. We're going to go beyond that, and we're going to talk about some other things. But what I wanted to point out is they have a little section on what to do with these types of races and these types of people, and then they have some like story plot backgrounds on the next 8 pages that are pretty good and pretty, not too complicated, that you can pretty much throw them in. But these are also races that kind of just don't fit in. So you might have that elf that was born and somehow left behind with another race, and somebody took it in. Let's take an elf again, and let's look at Three-Keen. What would happen if an elf was raised by the Three-Keen? You know, there's stories about boys in our society being raised by wolves. So why not taking, something down that line and applying it? And if you want some super details on that, you can go get the journal on what happened to the boy who was raised by the wolves. But the point is, how would a mindset differ if somebody or something was raised that way? And there are other ideas too, like, you can use it for, in Dungeons and Dragons, Dragonborn. You could have this place that's secluded, and it's a temple, and then all of a sudden a Dragonborn is born into this family of priests. Why? That's between you and the GM. How would he be seen? Or would he have been killed at birth? Who knows? And then there's the idea and the concept, which I've already mentioned once or twice, like you could take half elf, half dwarf. What would you do with that? I would start by using the advanced race guide and kind of comparing the two races, and make the dwarf, D-W-E-R-F, the dwarf, or the dwelf. But more importantly, you get to play around with things like, well, let's say he was a half elf and he maintained his elven height, and he wasn't as stocky, or he might not even be as strong. But what would happen if an elf was raised in a mine? How would that change the personality of an elf? Would it? That's even a better question. So you kind of look at the races, or one of the examples from Bastards of Glorian was Dampiers and Changelings. How can that come into play without altering your character too much? Or the whole idea of sorcerers is that your blood might have been tainted. That's a possibility. So what about taking that same thing and applying it to Demonborn, or giants, applying some giant aspects to your character, and things like this. They can be a lot of fun, but how they play out in the storyline is what really counts, and how they would affect your personality. Basically it comes down to a few things, and right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to list out some things that I have done in the past that are pretty basic and work pretty well. Basically, you start by comparing the races, picking and choosing the things the way you think they would work out, or the way you and your DM would think they work out. Would the child have tried to have been something he was not? A good example of this would, if a dragonborn child was fostered to a cleric and a paladin, would that child try and be more human-like and overcompensate for their physical appearance and feel like an outcast because of their physical appearance? Or would they just go right ahead and move on like it doesn't mean anything? Which is how most of us would probably play the character. I think that it's more fun to play the character, that when you're around humans, that Dragonborn character would tend to be more human than the humans, or more proper. But maybe when they deal with other races, that's not necessarily the case, because they have this little thing where they're trying to prove something. The other possibility is, was the character accepted? Sure, whoever raised him probably accepted him. And what were the trials and challenges of being raised or being accepted? For example, in the case of a Dragonborn child, what's the story behind you discovering you have dragon breath? Did you kill the neighbor's cat? I mean, Something like that. And how much did you freak out during puberty because of things like that? The other question is, does the character feel like they fit in? It doesn't matter if they did or didn't fit in. Did they feel like it was their perception that they were good enough, or was it that they weren't good enough and they actually have bouts where they act out? Because those things in personalities are learned and they can repeat. So if you can create a cycle where your character is going to act out, you can put that into your role-playing sessions easy enough. And when that one gets old, you can create another one. You know, and you can make your players, your party members that are your other players, attempt to move on and move through it and make you break those cycles. Another important part for this to me is the birthing story, or the story where you are introduced into the new society. Good example of this, where you legitimately born, or was your family part of a blood pact that goes back generations and you were just now born into it, and that's why you have some vampire blood or some demon blood or some angel's blood, or somehow you became a changeling because of that, and how will it affect you? And that's basically, you know, how I perceive the things that can be added to the bastard races and the bastards of role-playing that will improve your enjoyment and level of fulfillment in gaming. Now, next week we're going to look a lot more at alignment, and we're probably going to do it over 3 weeks. We're probably going to talk about lawful, neutral, and then chaotic with the little subsections. And the reason why I want to talk about alignment is because alignment is actually a pretty important part of your personality. And we'll talk about that next week. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Check back soon. I don't have my article typed up yet. In fact, I don't even have my last one typed up yet. My keyboard's broken, so I'm having a hard time with some letters. And I'm going to try and get that up tonight, and this one up by next week, along with my first one on alignment. Or maybe I'll have a better place, because I'm actually going to use some reference tools for alignment. And I'll have some links to those for you. Thanks very much for watching. I appreciate it. All of you that are sharing these videos, thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I wouldn't be here without you guys. So keep giving me the feedback. Keep letting me know what I'm doing right or wrong. If you have questions or ideas to expound upon it, please comment. Put them in the post, because that's what this is about. This is about all of us growing together as a community. Thank you, and have a good day. Oh, check our Kickstarter starting February 1st or 2nd or 3rd. Somewhere in there, right around the beginning of February. Check our Kickstarter for Season 4. Thank you very much. Have a good day.